Hello, and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, a podcast where we take a topic, that being absolutely anything, and well, cast views. Now, we had some homework to do for this week, didn't we?
We did indeed.
So, what homework did you go away and do? Because we went and got some, I think, natural phenomenon, psychological phenomenon, just strange unsolved phenomenon, I think, was the brief for this week.
I think we could class it as everything spooky, I think.
lots of spooky. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lead off with you, and you can give me your first spooky, scary, strange phenomenon.
I think the obvious one is about ghosts and ghost stories. But and the reason why, I think, when we were looking at coming up with this subject, but part of me was thinking, when I was a kid, there was a lot more around unexplained things and these supernatural phenomena and things like that. And I'm wondering now, is it generally that there's less of it, and why is there less of it? And do we have? Is there anything kind of in the modern time that we have applicable? But anyway, ghosts, right? Not your friendly Ghostbuster kind of varieties.
Not your Caspers and that sort of thing.
No, definitely not your Caspers. But yeah, I mean, there's so many ghost stories. So many people have seen it. And so is there something there? Now, I've always said to myself, I've always kind of tried to kind of rationally explain things and think, there's the argument that it's a desperation of people, grief, who want to believe they can still see people. To the other extent, I've sort of, in a scientific way, and thinking, as humans, we are electric, made up of electric pulses and thingamabobs like that. Hey, I'm not a scientist or a biologist, and could we interpret things around us like energy in the air as visions and things like that? So it's always kind of been a fascinating thing. And for me, one thing that one story that really kind of stood out, because it was actually near where I used to live. So there was I don't know, well, you've probably heard of it. If you haven't heard of it, you would have seen the film.
I think I know where you're going with this one.
Yeah, the Enfield Poltergeist.
Ah, yeah, the Enfield Hauntings. Yeah. They made TV shows about them, didn't they?
So, yeah, there was a Sky series. What was that called? I think it was called The Enfield Haunting, I think, actually. And The Conjuring 2, I think, is based on it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, and so people who don't know, it was basically, it was two sisters, two girls, and obviously any of the stories, I won't mention names. It's far enough away. I think this was in 1977 to 79, but there were two sisters, I think 13 and 11, who were basically being haunted. And if I remember right, some of the things were like, there was sort of writing coming up in their arms that looked like, scratched into their arms. It looked like blood. Their voices were turning into those of, so you've got an 11 and 13-year-old girl, their voices were turning into like deep voices of like 60-year-old men who've been smoking 60 a day.
Yeah, because I think you can listen to those recordings, can't you?
Yeah. They were pictured levitating. But what's weird about that, so they had a couple of, I think, paranormal groups investigate, and a lot of them have said yeah, they believed it's true and that there was credibility to it. But they also then did catch on video some of the like the girls, one of them, I think it was a younger girl, in another room, sort of the spoons that were being broken, she was bending them beforehand and basically pranking, like moving some of the items that were supposed to have been hidden. Cameras caught her moving those. So whilst I think the girls in the family were saying that whilst it was true, they were exaggerating some elements because they were kids. Yeah. But I think what was interesting is that, so it lasted, I think, it was 77 to 79, I think it was when I checked. And but I think over 30 odd people, different people, so whether it was friends or journalists and reporters, said they did see.
Yeah, I think there's a police officer at one point who testified to say that one of the girls had floated in front of him. And I think for a copper to say that is a bit, it's a bit more reliable at least.
But it's now, it's like looking back Because again, I didn't really dig too much into it, other than knowing, as I said, it was sort of fairly near to where I lived. Yeah, the fact that there was a couple of programs on it. Like I said, there was definitely a Sky documentary, The Enfield Haunting. If it's still about, check it out. It's interesting. And yeah, I looked at it. Some of the pictures where it was supposed to be the girl levitating. It did look like it was just one of the girls jumping up on the bed
at the right moment.
At the right moment, and some of the explanations were, I remember seeing programs trying to debunk it, saying that if you kind of scratch your arm, if you scratch your arm in a certain way, then when no one's looking, if you then rub your arm quickly, it brings the blood to the surface, and then it makes it look like that horrific. Right. But it's just odd, because I remember as a kid being quite terrified when I heard that story, because it's different if you hear it, if you see it now like it's a film or it's a haunting in the other side of the world. But when you hear something like that as a kid, and your mind as a kid just goes into overdrive.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's probably a couple of other like super world famous examples of like ghost stories, stroke possessions, that sort of thing. Was it the Amateurville House? Because that was the one where it was one of the sons, I think, of the family had woken up and then went and basically shot. Was it his two parents and two siblings, I believe?
I think it was a house where a person murdered the rest of the household, and then when the next family moved in, I think after like 28 days they moved out, because they were just, there was, I don't know if it was possessions, but it was definitely, weird shenanigans, let's say, going on.
Yeah, because I actually think that the family that had moved in after this crime had been committed, they ended up moving out, but I think they left all of their stuff in it and never went back. And I just think, like, for two parents and some kids, like if you're like, two reasonable adults who are responsible enough to have parents, for you to leave your house and leave all your possessions in it, never willing to go back, there must be something that's going on, if that makes sense.
What do you think about sort of ghost stories or hauntings or paranormal things?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, I used to watch Most Haunted when I was young. For anybody that's listening that doesn't know what Most Haunted was, Most Haunted was almost kind of like a budget Ghost Hunters, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, really? I'll be honest, I've never actually saw it myself.
No way. Oh, you're definitely watching them then. So, I mean, some of those things, I mean, I don't really believe and buy into like the whole psychic thing either, because I think that one kind of comes with the other. I think if you believe in like the ghosts and that sort of thing, you must kind of have to believe in like the mediums and the psychics. And I just think it kind of leads you on down loads of different roads. And I don't know if I can buy into it all. I mean, I think there are some things that are very strange and have like strange circumstances and not necessarily particularly explainable, but I don't know if I can get on board with the ghost ship. I don't know. Maybe I will one day.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't necessarily believe in it, but I'm not going to stay here and say I can absolutely disprove it, because there are so many people through so many different types of people as well, and by that I mean kind of like characters, ages, around the world.
Yeah, it's not like a unilateral thing to like one culture, for example. It's like a cross nation, cross age. It's kind of encompasses lots of different people. I get what you mean with that. That's true.
Yeah, and then you kind of think, is it lucid dreams and things like that? Does that play an element where people believe they're awake and they're having these visions or hallucinations or dreams where everything what they think they're seeing does appear to be real? I don't know, but it's just also to me, like with probably like a couple of the other things we'll come on to after. It seems very much I mean, of course, you still hear hauntings that now, but it seems very much like a pre-2000 thing. I don't think it seems like a common topic of discussion or new, news or anything. It seems to have been, these kind of things seem to be very much left in the past.
Yeah, that's very true. But I think as well nowadays as well, because we've got cameras basically everywhere, like, I think it really depends on how you fall. Because I think that, let's say that there's a video that comes out with, some sort of strange shadowy object moving through a security camera or something. I think that if you're in the camp that has a belief that ghosts exist, I think you immediately will take that as evidence. Whereas if you're a skeptic, you will just never take it as evidence, because there's always got to be a rational explanation. So I think that you kind of just sit one side of that now or the other. And I think that that's because we've just had better access to, like, you can go on YouTube and type in ghost compilations and look at, I don't know, a glass moving in a pub or something. And the comments will just be an argument about whether or not like death exists, because they don't know if ghosts are real. And so I think that it's like quite a polarizing thing, to be fair.
Well, I'd almost say, has modern technology meant you're less likely to believe things like that? Because now it feels like anyone with a smartphone and Instagram, like TikTok and Instagram could put a filter which makes it look like there's a ghost or something.
Yeah, this is true.
There are so many. I don't want to say, no, faked isn't the right word. Staged, because I don't think a lot of them are pretended to actually be real. But there are so many staged videos where they look bloody good, for someone just, like I say, with a smartphone. So, is it the fact that now you can see something and just say, "Oh, that's someone's CTR, someone's messing about with that. It's a filter." Now that your instinct is it's not real.
Yeah. Maybe it gives us an easy excuse.
And also, the other thing I've always had to myself, or thought to myself, sorry, was were ghost stories kind of used as a way of like keeping control of kids? And by that I mean, would you say that forest is haunted because you didn't want your kids to go down there?
Yeah.
Or something, or back in the day when we only had 4 channels. Yes, we only had 4 channels. Well, actually, I think we had, at some point there was 3, but it was almost like a form of entertainment. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's like, the whole like legend thing of sitting around a fire like 100 years ago. But then I guess what you say is true as well. Like a case of like, you tell your kids not to go down and play wherever because the bloody axe murderer is going to come and get them, or the ghost's going to come and get them. So yeah, I kind of guess that's true as well.
It was the boogeyman.
Yeah, the boogeyman.
Don't go there, the boogeyman. I mean, the other thing I've always thought about ghosts is it's always funny how it's like castles and old buildings, Victorian buildings, that seem to be haunted. Do you know what I mean? Like this, the stately.
It's never an old Tesco or something.
Yeah, or it's not like a 3-bed terraced, that was
yeah. Yeah. So it's never a new build, but then maybe it's just there's never been enough time for anyone to die there.
It's never a new build.
If you had a new build that was only 3 years old and it was haunted, I'd be like, oh shit. I'd be like, when did that happen?
Bloody unlucky. And actually. And what actually made me think that was I heard something on another. It was actually mentioned I think it was on a Twitch stream, and it was something I'd never heard before. But then kind of got fascinated when I heard it. It was called the stone tape theory, and the theory goes that traumatic events can be captured in rock or stone, almost like the walls of a building or an old or like a cliff face or in an old castle. And it's
right.
And I think that I actually looked this up actually last night, but I think it was this theory was almost sort of coined as early as I think stone tape theory as itself was kind of mentioned in 1940, but there was a I can't remember the name, but there was someone in 1837 was saying like words could leave a permanent impression in the air, which is similar to that, which would make you think, is that why there are so many things about haunted castles or haunted old houses? Because these events could be, and they're being replayed back almost like a projector.
And it's like, I guess, a culmination over hundreds and hundreds of years of these events, I guess.
Yeah, and again, I thought it was a kind of a fascinating idea at trying to explain why people maybe seeing things, and again, yeah, it's just like I said, I think it was just a really just an interesting viewpoint on. If it was to be real, could it be because an image is almost been imprinted in what kind of like do you remember in the start of Star Wars where R2-D2 is playing the video footage of and playing it back like that,
Yeah, I guess it's kind of because maybe there are like real world places are connected to like what was terrible trauma, and they kind of has like it almost draws like an attachment to that event. So maybe there's some legitimacy to it. I mean, if I was to believe in ghosts, I think it would probably make sense in my mind, to be fair.
But look at even kind of like films, and even it may sound silly, but like video games. right? If you're playing like a spooky or a scary or a horror game, there's always a level set in an abandoned hospital or like an old psychiatric facility where these kind of traumatic events could happen. And whether it's just because a place like that generally makes you or puts your mind into things that, oh my God, what could have happened here? Do you know what I mean? Maybe there's a combination of things that almost make you want to believe that you might see something or could see something. Because, that trope in games, the abandoned hospital, like I said to you, is there's always a level like that in a game.
Yeah, that's true. I guess you play anything remotely spooky, it's always castle, dark, at night, can't see much. It's, like you say, psychiatric ward. It's prison or something like that. Yeah, I get what you mean. Kind of draws the like impression immediately, doesn't it?
And how many times I actually said it myself, like when I was in a place where there was some buildings from like, I don't know, like it was the 1700s, I think. I actually said to myself, God, if these walls could talk, and it's like, well, what do I want them to tell me? I'm actually thinking like these walls are actually something physical, viewing everything that's happened and could. Do you know what I mean? I think we sometimes have that desire to want to see something, and like people say all the time, oh, if walls could talk, this house could tell stories. What stories is it going to tell you? Generally that.
Well, that's where Dave was murdered. Yeah. I'll be like, oh right, well then. And then you hit Dave.
Yeah.
Right, okay. I've got a question for you, which is a bit more lighthearted, but in relation to the whole ghost thing. Okay. So, if you believe in ghosts and ghosts exist, would you want to be able to talk to them? But you can't switch it off.
Oh, I was literally going to ask, could I switch it off?
Yeah, no switching it off. It's a bit like Whoopi Goldberg in the film Ghost.
Yeah, I think on that alone, I'd probably, it feels a bit mean, but I'd probably say no.
Really?
Well, in the sense of, I'd want to get some peace and quiet every now and then, and if they find out that I'm the one way they can talk to people.
Guess you're going to be pestered forever, really, aren't you?
Yeah, as long as they then couldn't talk to me between like 9 p.m. and 8 a.m.
Yeah, maybe if like you could reason with them and say, look, these are my working hours, these are my opening hours. You got to be here at 9, but I close at 5.
It depends. If it was like a one at a time, like a take a ticket system, I'd probably say yes.
Oh yeah, that's an odd way. Yeah, that's a decent way.
But I wouldn't, I wouldn't be able to hack if you could hear. Just if they had to be near you is one thing, but if you could hear them from miles away, then it'd probably just I'd probably go mad.
Yeah, you'd walk through a graveyard and it sound like a music festival.
Yeah. But having said that, could you imagine what you could find out?
Exactly. This is what I mean. So, I just think the benefit. I think that if ghosts were real, I think I'd like that ability. I think, regardless of whether I could switch it off or not, because I think that it would just be a cool thing in and of itself. And also, I think in my head, I'd be like, well, I don't need to worry about what comes after life.
That's true, actually.
I'd be like, this is class. I'd be like, I know that there's something else. I just need to make sure that I'm good. If that's what they tell me that I need to do.
And just think of all those people that could tell you that is exactly where the money is buried. The gold is buried. Yeah.
Yeah, this is exactly, this is what I'm saying. I'm turning around and I'm asking, right, okay, where was the lost treasure of,
What you said makes a lot of sense about, would it give you some reassurance? As long as they weren't telling you that, being stuck in limbo is bloody awful.
Yeah, or you get the demons that come and see you. You'd be like, oh, wow.
What are you saying? I'm never going to be any place where there are demons.
Oh, I don't know about me. I'm pretty certain.
I've lived a good life. But I think it would depend. I think there's definitely some good things about it, but it would need to be. I'd need to know there's kind of a limit to how many could talk to me at a time.
I think that's reasonable. I think that's fair. Now, you know what? It's strange because I've come up with kind of a similar topic to the ghost one and kind of stone theory. I guess you could kind of say they're linked. So I went and did near-death experiences as like a strange kind of phenomenon, basically. Yeah. So obviously people that have come close to death where their heart has stopped, they've been in accidents, that sort of thing. And I've got a couple of examples of what have been seen, basically.
Mm.
So a lot of them kind of all follow what you would consider like that cliche, having the white light and they're floating above their body, all the same kind of experience. But there are kind of a few of them that were a bit strange, just in terms of the kind of what was said. So a lot of them are from, do you know, like nursing homes, kind of hospices, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are kind of either staff members that work there or family members of people who've been in hospices that had basically had been told about their experiences by their relatives. So there was a couple of them. So one of them was a hospice nurse, and she said that I have hospice patients that say angels come and visit them. She said one lady said there's a little boy sitting at the foot of my bed saying I'm going to go soon. And she said that she used to see a lot of people at the end, basically, of their lives talking about the journey, essentially, and talking to like dead relatives who'd passed away. But she also said that whilst some of it was nice, she said that there were some really horrific experiences. So she basically said that there was another guy who'd he was an elderly man, obviously, kind of at the end of his life. And she walked into his room and he was absolutely just terrified in his room. And she said, "What's the matter?" And he turned around and described seeing scenes of pain and fire and like what he basically perceived as hell.
Mm.
And he'd basically not spoken to family in years. He'd had loads of unfinished business, essentially, that he didn't end up getting to see to. There was another person that had said that he had seen demons and all kinds of creatures, and he said it was like a horrific feeling, as in like the pain in his body basically is what he felt. So he ended up feeling something kind of physiological, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There was another one as well, and again, completely separate to the others. And this woman was working as a doctor in a hospital, and one of her long-term patients was essentially at the end of his life. And she described him as just an old man, but nobody really liked him. And that's because he was just like, he said sexually inappropriate things to nurses, and he called people like derogatory words and all of that sort of thing. And apparently a few hours before he died, he was absolutely terrified, and he was trying to apologize to everybody that he'd spoken to in the hospital. He'd basically turned around and was like apologizing for all the terrible things that he'd said and everything that he'd done in his life, because he was trembling with fear. And then a few hours later he died. And then all of the hospital staff said it was essentially just a really creepy environment going into that room where he died. Everybody described it as like the closest thing that you could feel to evil, basically. And there's a couple of instances where, you know, people have had hearts stopped and they've described crazy things happening, and you know, they've seen crazy lights or scenes or floated above their body, that sort of thing. I just think, you know, I guess, again, if we're believing in ghosts and we're believing in stone tape theory as a potential as well, I think this makes sense.
We've gone quite dark quite early on in our podcast careers here, haven't we?
Yeah. You know what? We actually have. I know. I mean, to be fair, if I turned around and saw hell, I'd be like, oh boy. I'd be like, it's too late to go back now.
Well, maybe hell's had a bad rep. Maybe, you know, it might not be as bad as we've seen.
Well, apparently the weather's hot.
Oh, yeah, and this may date when we record this, but yeah, right now is one of the hottest days of the year so far. So
I do feel like I'm in hell at the minute.
I'm not good with heat, so I'm definitely sorting myself out. But yeah, this is another one where not another one. I actually can believe some of the stories, because I just do think that when you're that close, obviously it depends kind of what's wrong with the person, but you know, I've known and I've seen certain, you know, people with illnesses, and I think what some of them can do to the body and to the mind maybe you know, can make them think that you know, that they're seeing it, you know, and I'm making it sound like that the person is imagining it rather than it being a real thing. At the moment, I got to think that kind of like the trauma and what the body's going through potentially does make certain things like that seem real. I mean, the ones that then, having said that, you know, how do you explain away other people saying that they, you know, when they're under sort of being operated on and they're floating above themselves and seeing everything that's going on? How do you explain that, I guess? But yeah, it's always I think what this relies on as well is whether you believe, I suppose do you believe in the afterlife as well? And that doesn't necessarily dictate, I'm not saying whether you believe in ghosts or not, but you know, the concept of heaven and hell, you know, does that play into it?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, the kind of concept or idea of just an afterlife in general is kind of really the basis for whether or not you kind of think there's anything further. Because, I mean, I think that some people are a case of, once the lights go out, that's that. And so if that's the case, I mean, whatever your brain does when it shuts down is one of those things. I think I had a couple of like theory stroke explanations for this one. So there's one about skeptics, basically, that have suggested that the experience are just explainable as like hallucinations of a traumatized brain. So apparently they studied people with cardiac arrests, and they found that when the heart's dying, it gets peppered by signals from the brain, which is essentially just trying to stay active. And then they're saying that potential scrambling of signals is just what's causing near-death experiences. I think there was another one about like a chemical DMT, which is like just released into the brain, and that makes you hallucinate, that sort of thing. So, I mean, there is kind of, I guess, explanations for it. But then again, some experiences are very particular. I mean, there have been some people that have died, woken up 45 minutes later because they've had their chest pumped and they've known something about somebody else's life who's like halfway across the world. So, I guess that's kind of the strange ones, really. But again, I think it just depends. It depends. I think that if you're into the kind of believing that there's an afterlife and there's not, there is a sequel, then I guess, near-death experiences are a pretty standard thing, really.
This time it's personal. I mean, on that again, I know we're not specifically talking about the afterlife, but I've always said, sort of growing up in a house where, or in a family, extended family where religion has been a thing, that kind of, do I believe in the concept of heaven and hell? It's always been there. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
you think about it, but personally, I've always thought, yeah. Sort of when the lights are out. But the way I see it, and I say it quite flippantly, but I want there to be something else after. Do you know what I mean?
that's fair as well.
I want there to be something after all this. This feels like it should be the warm up to something better.
Yeah. I can kind of get that.
My view on this is, I think this is probably something more that probably more people could experience, because, like I said, I think between the two of us, we've said a number of things. Like, I think the kind of the trauma that an illness puts the body under, the medication that's probably going through a person when they're at that stage.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I kind of said it in the Ghost, where for a while when I was younger, I thought, well, if we are, like I said, if the brain and and nerves are electrical synapses or whatever, because I'm neither of those things, but could we pick up things that are happening around us? And in a medical, like in a surgery room, there's all sorts of machinery and gizmos and gadgets and bits and bobs that are going around. So is it a perfect storm of all kind of things, and has a person been reliving their life before, because they know their time is coming? So is it, is this all putting the brain under so much strain that they are seeing this? So I think this is probably something that I'm going to say does happen. I'm not going to say necessarily that it's a true, like, out of body experience, or they are actually seeing an afterlife and then they come back. But I think I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that people are seeing or feeling something when they're at that point.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. I don't know. I think the whole ghost thing, I think the more you think about ghosts, the more creepy it actually gets, because you start to question, like, is there something afterwards?
Well, do you know what? When I go on to my next point, when I was reading about, I was reminding myself of the Enfield haunting, and then especially this next thing, I actually started feeling a bit, I was thinking, that's enough. That's enough of this for now.
I've only got a couple in me. I can't do any more of this depressing stuff.
Put a couple of episodes of Friends or Brooklyn Nine-Nine on just to, have a couple of laughs. Because that sorts everything, wards everything off.
No Conjuring for me. No Woman in Black for me tonight.
Do you know what? It's funny because I tend to watch films fairly late, but I just got round to watching Hereditary. Have you seen that?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so I watched that, and that is actually, for me anyway, it's quite a creepy film. It's actually I know we're getting off topic now a bit, but I'll bring it back in. So the acting, I think it's what's her name, Toni Collette in it, and it's, without giving spoilers, but it's quite a creepy film. There's a bit of paranormal sort of topic in there. And by the end of it, I just felt yeah, it was just really well done. It was really effective at making you creepy without it being cheap shock scares, jump scares, or anything like that. And I then started looking at the things for this podcast, and I did literally think, yeah, I put what did I put on? I put Ride Along on, I think, with
Yeah.
Kevin Hart, sorry, and
Kevin Hart, yeah,
yeah,
right along Ice Cube and
Ice
Kevin
Cube.
Hart.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, brilliant. I just need something fun, just to take the take. So, do you want me to move on to the next thing, or did you
Yeah,
want
I'll
to
tell you what then. Let's see if the next one's either more scary or less scary.
This one is just weird, and again, it's not one that I think was like, I didn't hear hundreds of stories. It's not like near death experience or ghosts or UFOs or anything like this, but it's spontaneous human combustion. And I only laugh because it is really bizarre. Have you heard of that? Have you?
I have. I think this is obviously just where people just randomly burst into flames, and obviously we're not laughing just in case anybody has experienced spontaneous human combustion that's listening to this. I imagine you wouldn't be listening to this if you did, but just in case.
So I knew what I wanted to talk about, but yeah, I did look at the old Wikipedia last night just to get what the definition is, or what they've got the definition as, and it's death from a fire originating without an apparent external source of ignition. And I think it goes back as far as 1746. Again, I had to look this up because this isn't the sort of information I just have to pull out of a hat, my head, unfortunately. But it was in 1823. There was a published book that said that basically the following factors were what were common in SHC, spontaneous human combustion, and it was they generally, and again, this was at the times. Remember, this was 200 years ago almost. But they were chronic alcoholics, that they were usually elderly people, usually females, that the body had not burned spontaneously, but a lighted substance had come into contact with it, that the hands and the feet fell off, which is why it won't burn. Fire caused little damage to combustible things near the body, and combustion of the body left a residue of smelly, greasy ashes. And so I thought to myself, because again, and then I started thinking to myself, because I hadn't heard of this for many, many years. And I thought, was it a story that over time when I was younger, I thought was supposed to be a real phenomenon? Do you know what I mean? Was it like one of these urban legends or myths or something that was used in a TV program? But there were actually a couple of fairly recent ones.
Okay.
And again, I won't say names because I don't think that's fair. But when I say recent, I'll start with the more recent one, and there was one actually in 2010. So I know it's 11 years ago, but it's actually only 11 years ago. And it was a person in Ireland and this was apparently the doctor had stated that the death of this 76-year-old man was spontaneous human combustion.
Oh, wow. So that was like what it was marked as?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the next one was in 1980. So again, we're only talking, 41 years ago. It was a 73-year-old man, again, in the UK. And his entire body, the description was the entire body was incinerated, leaving only a skull and a portion of each leg below the knee. And the feet and the legs were still fully clothed. Now, along with this, what they think is what it is something called the Wick Effect, which is, if I've remembered this correctly, because this is probably where I stopped writing because I just wanted to watch Ride Along. It's where the clothing, I think, so something's happening and the clothing they're starting to burn and the clothing absorbs the fat of the person.
Right,
and
okay.
Then it becomes like a candle with that, the clothing being, I think the clothing is then the wick and the fat being the wax of the candle. But again, and I think what made me creep out a little bit when I read this was, unlike when I was looking at the ghosts, the story I found about the Enfield haunting. Yeah, okay, that's horrible. It was creepy. But the two little girls now, they're fine. They're adults, and they actually do talk about what they happened. They say, well, they exaggerated things. I forgot to say it, that it was true, but they've gone. I believe both. At least one of them has gone on, had family, etc., etc. And we've just said ourselves whether you think you believe in ghosts or not. Whereas this, I've got two examples in fairly recent history where it's actually happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was quite weird. So obviously it's not 100 cases a day or a year, but I just found it. I just always remember as it being oddly, not odd, oddly is the wrong word, but oddly fascinated by it because it's such a bizarre scenario.
Yeah, it's like the most like. How do you explain that in terms of like? Imagine if you know a person, like for example, like the friends or family of those two examples that you gave. Like, how do you possibly like come to comprehend that?
Yeah, and you know, like some people say, you know, in those factors in that old book, you know, they're saying it could be chronic alcoholic, so it could be is there alcohol fumes in the clothing or something like that? Do you know what I mean? So again, you could argue that there is a logical start to that, but
Okay,
it's
yeah,
still a
that's fair.
horrible. It's still, you know, it's still an odd thing, and I think, you know, I think you do see it referenced in a couple of programs now, but generally in like programs portraying themselves as being in older times rather than anything modern. Personally, even though I've given some examples of recent, it's to me it feels uniquely from older, you know, many years ago, rather than it being anything that's discussed now.
It's not like just an urban legend
Yeah,
as opposed to
yeah.
something that's evidently, you know,
Yeah, so
been happening. If that makes
what's your
sense.
thought on that then?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, the fact that I'm a very I like to think that I'm a very reasonable person. I like to think I'm very rational. So I guess when you're saying about them being alcoholics, like, is it true? Is it something to do with like, you know, the alcohol either being on them or in their system?
Mm.
The fact that there's bits of them left, though, I think is a bit strange. But then again, that's kind of explained by the Wick Effect, like you were saying. So that would explain that. I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty scary concept. I know that it's only happened twice in like the last 40 years, but still got to be two people.
Yeah, well, that's twice that I saw on you know the internet. So it could be that there's more that haven't maybe necessarily been reported. But you know, like I said, I was kind of, it was a one in 2010 where that's kind of what the doctor had said. That's what made me sit back and think, blimey, you know, you know, it's quite a horrible phenomenon.
Yeah, yeah, it's just very creepy. And you know what? I've got my computer open, and I would definitely not recommend typing it in and then clicking images.
Oh, I didn't do that. Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely going to be watching Ride Along after this. In fact, I think I'm going to be watching Powerpuff Girls or something after this.
Ride Along 2 and 3, because apparently there are sequels. So I'll probably need to see something after discussing this. So,
But yeah, well, wow. Evidently, definitely happened before, and definitely confused as to why there are bits left. But yeah, yeah.
but
No, I think that,
and again, without kind of, you know, and hopefully we should probably put a don't listen to this while you're eating warning at the start. But I'm wondering if it is due to maybe the body fat being a part of it.
yeah,
Maybe your
yeah.
hands and feet. By the time it gets down to, I don't know. I don't know.
Oh well, I'm definitely at higher risk of spontaneous human combustion. Then, my God, imagine it's something the skinny people don't have to worry about.
I was thinking, God, when I was younger, the amount of you know, Lynx deodorant used to spray all over the clothing. That was probably a hazard right there. But yeah, what's your next one? What's your next one?
Okay, so my next strange mystery is we're kind of we're kind of leading on to something a bit different now, and I've got the Bermuda Triangle. Now, the Bermuda Triangle is an area of ocean that touches Bermuda and then touches Florida and Puerto Rico to form what is a triangle. So there's been 123 aircrafts lost since 1945, and at least 50 ships have gone missing in that period as well. And there's a couple of examples where there's been like military ships that have gone missing. So they're a bit more, you know, reliable, I guess, in terms of source. Well, I don't know. It depends on whether or not you believe in the military. But they're American planes anyway. So one of the examples about kind of strange disappearances in the area were 5 US Navy bombers in 1945 basically went missing in the Bermuda Triangle. Never ever turned up again. No wreckage ever found, nothing like that. And one of the pilots was reported to have said just before they essentially went off radar, "We are entering white water. Nothing seems right. We don't know where we are. The water is green. No, it's white." And apparently the rescue aircraft, which had 13 on board, also went missing, never turned up, basically. Very, very strange, because it's kind of military as well.
Yeah.
There was one with a ship as well. So this was one of the biggest essentially disappearances or losses of a warship outside of like war scenario. So it was the USS Cyclops, and it went missing in the Bermuda Triangle, carrying over 309 sailors, and it just disappeared. No wreckage ever found, no debris ever washed up on any beaches, nothing. It was carrying like 11,000 tons of goods or something like that. I think it left from Barbados or something, and it essentially just left the face of the earth pretty much. They never found any wreckage, no evidence of a single theory. I mean, people theorized that it was either storms, capsizing, or potentially, war activity. But I think that was 1918 at the time. So I don't know how developed war. Like, I don't think we had submarines back then. So I don't know kind of what extent that could have been potentially a theory. But yeah, just very strange. Lots of aircrafts that have gone missing have just never had any wreckage ever turn up. And usually that's quite strange, because you can track currents and you can kind of predict where, if you know where something's gone down, where wreckage might turn up. But yeah, that's kind of my other strange one.
See, I mean, did you actually know about the Bermuda Triangle, or was it something that you found?
Yeah, I knew about the Bermuda Triangle briefly before. I didn't know specific examples and that sort of thing. And then when I started reading specific examples, I was like, I'm never getting on a plane to Bermuda ever in my life.
I think, again, it's one of those things where possibly more technology, more cameras, more, advances in plane, what we have on planes and then ships has maybe debunked that. I don't know.
It depends. I mean, there's loads of different ones. There's some where you've got like private yachts with a couple of people on board, but there have been some since the 90s. So there's 1991, which was the disappearance of a pilot. Gave his altitude as 29,000 feet, and then apparently the aircraft just faded until it disappeared from radar, basically, and then was never seen again. It was 1999, another disappearance. It was a freighter though this time, so that was a cargo ship going out to St. Vincent. Received a distress call, basically never heard from again. US Coast Guard searched like a huge, like tens of thousands of square kilometers or something, and never ever turned up any wreckage. And then there were some smaller ones. So 2003, you had a fishing boat that went missing again, nothing ever found. You had 2007, there was a plane that went down, disappeared, 2 casualties, but again never found. 2008. So again, kind of relatively recently. I mean, there are some 2017 as well, near the Bahamas.
Yeah, I had it. I just always put it down as something that happened in the 80s and possibly early 90s. Yeah. So again, for anyone listening who doesn't know about it, yeah, have a look up, because we're not talking about a little triangle. The thing and the reason I mentioned that was because the two things I remember seeing when when thinking about this is one theory is that the area of this triangle, which what I'm saying is not little, is so big that it's comparable to any other ocean or area of ocean of that size. It's comparable to the amount of things that go missing there as it is that, so it's no much more of a mystery than those, but
than any other part of the ocean. Yeah, that to be fair, yeah.
So and my logical the logical part of my brain says, okay, that's absolutely understandable then. But then if you said, like you said, in certain cases they never then tracked any bit of the wreckage, I'm thinking, well, generally nowadays they do, don't they? You do tend to.
Yeah.
So why, if there are genuinely vehicles that haven't had anything recovered, then that would be weird. So that would go against what I think of that first statement about it being so vast an area that it's natural to have that happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that's strange for me is that it's a lot of like military aircraft and military ships, because typically they don't just go missing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're things that are like well protected. Like, governments have vested interests in both, soldiers, planes, ships. And I just think that that's very, very strange that they go missing and they kind of never turn up. But I do have some theories for you, and I want you to tell me which you think is the most plausible. So I've got three main theories. Now, we'll get the most stupid one out of the way first.
I think I might know what this one is, and I think that's the best one.
No. Well, I'm going to get the most unrealistic one out of the way first. So human error, weather, hurricanes, big waves, and that sort of thing. I think that's completely implausible because the next two are much, much better.
Yeah, go on.
So the second theory is alien abductions.
Oh, I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah. So apparently the particular area has some sort of hotspot for alien landings on Earth, and as a result, that's where aliens get all of their human experiments from. So they beam up all of these ships and planes to take them to, I don't know what planet they go to, somewhere in Guardians of the Galaxy anyway.
See, aliens is something we should probably do an episode on its own. What I would say about that, and it probably it kind of goes against everything I've said here. So whilst I haven't seen an alien before, that's something I'd like to think does exist, because, you know, we're constantly told how big the universe is and how we're just a tiny speck of dust in it. That I'd like to think, or I can't imagine that there can't be anything else out there. So that's one bit, but then why they would just love that one bit of Earth to go.
Yeah,
that's what.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I guess, yeah, there's probably more interesting places to visit as well, I think, you know, why you'd want to continue going. But then again, maybe the aliens like the exotic weather. It's kind of off the coast of Florida. Nice place, always sunny. They've got lots of storms to hide their activity. If I was an alien, I wouldn't want to be seen.
There you go.
Yeah, this is the thing. You've got to think like an alien with this one.
Oh, now I'm starting to get worried.
We've got War of the Worlds. Right, and now I think my favourite and most plausible explanation is it's the location of the lost city of Atlantis.
Yes, I was hoping you'd say that, because that's
yeah.
what and again, that feels like that should be an episode in and of itself.
In and of itself as well. Yeah.
So the question is then, though, have they found Atlantis?
Well, apparently, they found man-made structures under the surface of the water, which are all like rectangular in nature. So they believe that they could have only been placed there by people. Obviously, like Plato was one of like the Greek writers, wasn't he? And apparently he theorized that Atlantis was really far advanced in terms of technology, and believed that potentially Atlantis could have survived underwater because that's how advanced the technology was. So I think the basis for the theory goes is that the civilization that they have, or have, as if it's like, you know, perfectly plausible in my mind, the civilization that they have could have the power to disrupt electromagnetic fields and essentially sink ships and down aircrafts. So they could salvage sunken wreckage.
I was going to ask what the actual cause was. So they're saying that it's intentional then?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I understand. What I understand it to be, because the theory that I was reading on was that, again, it was for the basis of salvaging sunken wreckage. Because I guess when you're under the ocean, like, you know, I don't know where you get. You need material. So you're like, oh look, it's a 30,000-ton tanker. That one will do.
See, I always, again, as a kid, I remembered it to be an area of high magnetism, or whatever, that sent ships and planes, instrumentation crazy. So, you know, if that's what you're saying about this theory is true, then it would feed into that, right?
Yeah. And you know what I was also thinking? Jar Jar Binks' civilization already proved that they can live underwater.
Well, and also video game mention coming up again now, but Bioshock. Have you played Bioshock?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, that's under the water as well, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I mean,
it's too coincidental that all these things are related to civilizations underwater to not be a biopic. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I think that what it is a bit like the film Paul. Have you ever seen that? The one with the alien?
Yeah.
And he's giving director's tips to Steven Spielberg.
yeah. It's like it's just preparing us, isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, I think the Bermuda Triangle one's a bit of a strange one. I think the point about you as well, with what you said about how it's kind of just comparable to other parts of the ocean, I agree with. I think my only thought on it is the fact that so many military ships have gone missing, and so many military aircraft have gone missing, and typically they are just not things that disappear, basically.
Yeah, no, that is the odd
That's
bit.
very dodgy.
That's the odd bit. But again, I would say, along with, well, having said that, the human combustion, we've got examples where we've said it is real. It's not just a story. But I would say this with the near death, I think, could happen because with vehicles, with planes, which we know there are accidents, we know there are issues all the time, and that is the ocean where if anything's going to get lost, it's going to be in the ocean, right? So, do we attach? And this is kind of what I was going to say. So, I don't mean to move you on if you had more saying it, but it's like, in my view, when we were talking about doing this as a show, again, it goes back to I think something said at the start. Are all these things, did people attach more thought and feeling to it back in the day because it felt more exotic, pre-internet, pre 100 channels, pre the sci-fi channel, pre ghost hunters, etc. Was it more of a curiosity, more of a thing that there was some mystery that you couldn't explain?
Yeah, people may be drawing the mystery out of it as opposed to it being a mystery that you want to look at.
Yeah, programs like the X-Files, it just tapped into that. There's got to be something else out there, something bigger out there. And, now, like you've just done during this, you can hear something, you tap it into Google, right? Other search engines are available. And you get probably 200, 300 pages full of things you don't want to see. But 200 pages of examples and explanations and debunkings and evidence of what you want. So everything is there now. Are things like this typically something held in the past? So, and if that's the case, then do we have modern phenomena like that? And I think I tasked us both to think about, did we think there were any other?
Yeah, you know what? I think that, do you know those things that you kind of just seem like they're kind of just like creepy bedtime stories? Because that's really kind of what most of the things that we discuss kind of feel like. But nowadays, I just think that we're too well connected for anything to kind of gain that sort of like traction. It's almost like the whole deaths and ghost thing. It's kind of ghost story told and then passed down, and then the more you see, it's like, for example, if you'd have asked my parents and my grandparents, I probably would tell you that they would believe in spirits. But if you were to ask me, it's a straight no. Now, is that because I'm probably better connected to the world, and so I kind of have a better view, and I wasn't kind of as I was exposed more to more information as opposed to just what was told to me, and that probably does play into a factor. But you know what? I just couldn't think of anything that is kind of modern day legend almost.
But it's funny what you say about your parents and your grandparents, right, as opposed to you. And it's like there were a lot more things aimed at the unexplained and the mystery. I remember, my sister getting a set of books. I can't remember what the books were called, but each month it was, it was one of these like part work books, you call them now. And each month it was something else of the unexplained and paranormal. And, we still look at, we've still got tours for Loch Ness Monster, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeti and the Bigfoot. I mean, again, video game. Wasn't Grand Theft Auto one of the Grand Theft Autos? There was fabled that you could see the Bigfoot or the Yeti in that.
Actually, yeah.
Crop circles, something we didn't touch about, but I know that's more with aliens.
Yeah, do you know what it is? I feel like crop circles are just farmers pushing barrels around, though, and I feel like I don't know. Like I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen a crop circle story like hit the newspapers.
Exactly. And I think it was raves. I think it was illegal raves back in the day. But yeah, exactly. That was massive for about a couple of years, and then it went. And one of the other things, again, before I could think of anything modern, was this is a modern thing actually, but the whole concept of deja vu. So I suppose similar to your near-death experience, but where like a glitch in the Matrix or something, where you've seen something before.
Yeah, kind of like a blip where you're like, no, I've definitely been here, I've definitely done this, but you can't pinpoint when it's happened.
Yeah. Oh, another one that just come to mind. What was it? Reincarnation. Past lives.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, was it there was more of an audience, for want of a better word, than there is now, and has technology been able to debunk a lot of the fake ones or people trying to fake things?
Yeah, I think as well now it's much more difficult to be convincing. So, for example, do you remember there's that really famous photo you talked about, the Loch Ness Monster? there's that really, really famous photo of the Loch Ness monster. Do you know, it's like poking out of the water, and then it was later on proved to be a fake because it was a bloke with like some barrels and some string, who basically put like a buoy essentially in the water. I think nowadays it's just more and more difficult to try and fake something like that, just because the level that you have to go to fake it is higher. Like nowadays you'd see that photo, if that photo came out tomorrow, and you just obviously wouldn't think anything of it because it's a grainy, dark, black and white photo that, you know, looks like a bit of a splodge in some water. Whereas, you know, when you don't have access to that technology like you didn't 20, 30, 40 years ago, it just makes everything a bit more plausible, I think.
And also, is it that the times we live in, there's just enough crazy crap going on as it is without having to throw in extraterrestrial stuff or paranormal to make things even weirder?
Yeah, you couldn't imagine like having to go through like the midst of the coronavirus pandemic and then worrying about War of the Worlds at the same time. I'd be like, you know what?
Yeah, I mean, kind of before we finish, the only thing, and I'm going to throw something out there, of modernish, but I really don't know much about it. Slenderman, I think, is the only one I know of that feels like it's modernish, I believe.
Yeah, because that kind of took the internet by storm, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, I feel. But there was wasn't there a set of murders with like some teenage girls that tried to murder like a classmate or something?
The fact of being murdered does ring a bell, but again, like I said, I really don't know. It's just something I remember seeing. Oh no, I think there was something else. I think I know what you're saying. There was another.
Oh yeah, here we go. I've got it. In 2014, two 12-year-old girls lured their best friend into the woods and stabbed her 19 times in an attempt to become proxies of the fictional character Slenderman.
Wow.
Girl didn't actually end up dying. She recovered in hospital. Perpetrators were not found guilty of any mental disease or defects, and committed to mental health institutions for sentences of 25 and 40 years respectively. That's a long, long time. But I guess, you know, that goes to show what the power of like urban legends has. Like, you make somebody fearful enough to believe something that's absolutely ludicrous. Well, I think the Slender Man's ludicrous. I couldn't tell you because I've never seen him.
But yeah, I think that was quite an interesting kind of run through of strange and weird and odd.
Wonderful. Strange, weird, scary. Well, maybe not so much wonderful. Do you know what it is, though? I feel like you could actually do 10 episodes on strange, like phenomenon, whether it be psychological or paranormal, whatever it might be, because there's also just so many like case studies that you could take and use. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to leave it on a note, but I'm going to leave it on a note for anybody that's listening to go and research something that's really spooky. So if anybody doesn't want to be able to sleep tonight, you can go and Google Wendigo psychosis, and that can be your evening read. And we'll leave it on that.
No, I'm going to watch some Friends.
After reading about Wendigo psychosis.
but if you are listening to this, just do tweet us. Let us know what your thoughts are on this, or any urban legends or anything you want to mention.
Yeah, and I think that I'm going to bed with the light on tonight, so
we'll try have something lighter next time, okay?
Yeah. We'll talk about cartoons maybe next time or something. Or if anybody wants to give us any suggestions for something a bit lighter, maybe. Yeah, maybe we'll go one up, one down.
Yeah. Cheers, Lou. That's you have given me the stuff of nightmares now.